this is to some extent the question that I was anticipating. One has, of course, the scriptures. One has, of course, tradition. And I did say, at the very end, I think, of that lecture I gave on karma and rebirth, that the whole subject needs really reassessment. It does seem that in the literature, not excluding the canonical literature, that there are certain things, certain teachings, certain statements, in connection with the question of karma and rebirth, which seem to be inconsistent, with certain things that we now know. So there needs to be a sort of process of sorting out. There are, for instance, some statements which we can accept quite literally, others which seem to be meant to be taken metaphorically or symbolically, and others which just seem to be the result of popular belief and are just plain wrong. We have to try to sort out all that. But you also asked whether there are any other sources of information with regards to rebirth or reincarnation, previous lives. So nowadays there would appear to be, because the whole subject in the course of the last few decades has been investigated or begun to be investigated on what one can only describe as a sort of scientific or semi-scientific basis. There are quite a few researchers who have been gathering empirical evidence which seems to point in the direction of rebirth, collecting case histories, case histories which are not only recorded but which are checked up on. I believe several thousand such case histories have now been recorded and checked up on by various workers in this field. And then, of course, there are people who are working in the field of hypnotism and who claim to be able to make people or help people regress under hypnotism to previous lives. Again, however interesting and colourful such alleged recollections may be, they don't constitute evidence for rebirth unless there's some independent objective corroboration. But there does seem to be that in quite a number of cases, quite a substantial number of cases. So there is a sort of growing body of evidence. And it would seem that whatever information, verified information we're able to gain from these sources has to be compared, with the material dealing with this subject which we have in the Buddhist and perhaps other scriptures, so that we can sort out the true from the false, what is to be taken literally from what is to be taken, metaphorically or symbolically, and so on. But the whole process has only just started. But it would seem, as far as I can gather, from all this material, that the fact of rebirth, or the fact of karma and rebirth, because the two are rather distinct, is being placed on a more and more solid and incontestable foundation. That would seem to be the trend. But it would also seem that there are certain rather popular, traditional Buddhist views, not necessarily found in the scriptures, which may have to go. There's a little book I wanted to mention in this connection, which I brought with me and which I read recently. It's called Rebirth and the Western Buddhist. And it's by someone called Martin Wilson, 2 L's. It's published by Wisdom Publications. It's only a small book, it's less than 60 pages. But it covers the whole area in a quite comprehensive way. The author is quite scholarly, he's quite critical. He has been convinced of the truth of rebirth. He is himself a Buddhist. He also has some very interesting things to say, some rather critical things to say about traditional Tibetan logical arguments in favour of rebirth, including some, which have been approved or passed by the Dalai Lama. He faults their logic, including the Dalai Lama's logic, quite definitely. But nonetheless, he does regard, the fact of rebirth, the fact of karma and rebirth, as having, been established. I'm not in a position to lend anybody this book at the moment because I'm thinking of writing a review on it, a short one for the newsletter. Whereas I think it's a very useful book indeed, a worthwhile book, and also has the advantage of being short. But if I'm able to write this little review, people are free to borrow the book from me afterwards. Otherwise, you can try to get hold of a copy when you get back. It's well worth reading. The author, by the way, does take the view that you can hardly be a Buddhist without believing in karma and rebirth. Though that does not necessarily mean accepting every statement on the subject of karma and rebirth contained in the Buddhist scriptures, especially as some of those statements apparently are incompatible with one another.